Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our witnesses. Thank you for being here. To Representative Garcia, Chairman of or Ranking Member of the House Oversight Committee, and to my wonderful colleague, Senator Whitehouse, who has been instrumental in the topic that brings us here today. We're here for another important hearing and investigation into the Trump administration's brazen, unprecedented corruption and disregard for the American people. As we all know, everyday Americans are struggling to make ends meet, put food on the table, buy gasoline, and most everything else. Donald Trump has embarked on a series of 18 vanity projects costing more than $1 billion. Corruption has consequences. Corruption has costs. And we are seeing the costs in dollars and cents, but also the desecration of iconic national monuments that symbolize America at this 250th anniversary of our great country. Donald Trump's taste for gilded excesses has long been known, but over the past year, we ought to be shocked at how far he has shown he's willing to go. And let me just quickly outline for you how bills have ballooned and quality has cratered. The East Wing renovation, as it was called, has ballooned in cost from $200 million to $400 million and now $600 million in a no-bid contract, single source with Clark Construction. The reflecting pool, which itself is a disaster, in now empty and fenced off from the public, has gone to a total so far of more than $17 million, but the work has to be redone. So likely that cost will be doubled. Lafayette Park, which originally was supposed to cost $3.3 million, is now again with Clark Construction at a cost of $17 million. And the reflecting pool was a no-source, single-source, non-competitive, no-bid contract with Green Water Services, which is owned by a Trump donor. In fact, that donor has given to Trump's campaign and other projects more than $500,000. Those are just some of the projects we see underway. I want to go back to last October when President Trump announced on Truth Social that he was remodeling the Lincoln bedroom and most particularly the Lincoln bathroom of the White House in, quote, polished statuary marble. Of course, he didn't tell us how much the renovation was going to cost, but estimates suggest that it has put burdens on taxpayers of about $1.6 million. And that was just the beginning. In the months since, he's treated the entire Capitol as his personal Versailles, a palace on the Potomac. He's destroyed a full wing of the White House, repainted the reflecting pool, shuttered the Kennedy Center name, and he's planning to build a massive ark to glorify himself. Meanwhile, he's consistently refused to do anything to help the American people with the struggles they face, whether it be extending the ACA subsidies, providing funding for SNAP, or simply signing a housing bill that passed Congress with overwhelming support. These actions aren't the hallmark of a president. They are more like hallmarks of an authoritarian dictator who's only concerned about himself and not the people he was elected to serve. And the people profiting are Trump cronies who are paid inflated sums from taxpayer dollars through shady, no-bid contracts for work they are not qualified to do. When the American people aren't overpaying Trump or his friends directly, major companies are getting rich with contracts awarded or lawsuits dropped after they make donations in untold millions. This story of corruption has human costs as well. President Trump wants to be king. He doesn't care who gets hurt or lost along the way. Arlington National Cemetery is hallowed ground. It's hallowed ground for all Americans, not just veterans. It's a solemn resting place with a view overlooking the Lincoln Memorial in recognition of what servicemen and women give or have given to our country. President Trump wants to desecrate Arlington by building a massive ark in tribute to himself, which will cast an imposing shadow over that sacred place. The American people have lost a bipartisan cultural touchstone, and artists across the country have lost a place that should be recognized for their achievement without regard to political affiliation. The East Wing of the White House stood for over a century as a place where ordinary Americans entered to tour the house built for presidents, the people's house, our house, to reside as custodians of our shared history. They're not the owners. They lived there for a while. They're temporary occupants, but President Trump knocked it down as though he were the owner to construct a massive, ornate ballroom that we now hear the American people are supposed to contribute hundreds of millions of dollars to construct. He promised it was going to be funded all privately. Indeed, tens of millions were raised from companies that have business before the government. Of those donors, more than half have received new contracts or expanded the ones they have now. Pay to play is the MO here. These actions are a microcosm of how the president views our whole country. He expects all of us to glorify him at every failing act and pay money to his friends and family whenever they ask, and even while everyday Americans struggle to meet the needs of life. That's not the America our founders fought for 250 years ago. It's the America they sought to prevent through the Emoluments Clause, which forbids benefits going to the president. And it's not the America we want to live in today. I turn to Representative Garcia for his remarks.
Well, thank you as always, Senator Blumenthal, and for your leadership in these joint hearings, which have all been really instructive. And today is so important. And I know that the Senate and certainly us in the House care deeply about our history, America's monuments, and the future where we go from here. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. It's a really important hearing that we're having. And we're here today to call out the disgusting vanity, incompetence, and corruption of President Donald Trump. The American people are struggling. The rent is too damn high. Grocery prices are up. Gas prices are up. Every American family is paying the costs of Trump's tariffs and economy. But the president doesn't care about working families. He claims affordability is a hoax. His only priority is himself and his family. And he is obsessed with weaponizing his office for profit, collecting over $2 billion in his first year in office alone. And his family is looting billions more from the American taxpayer. And today we're going to talk about his obsession with rebuilding D.C. as a monument to his own ego. Now, there is currently a $14 million renovation happening that's plagued by algae and a bottom that's chipping away and falling apart at the reflecting pool. This pool has been drained twice just in 3 months for repairs. Built so incompetently that they're trying to put an innocent man to jail to cover up their shoddy work, with contracts going to Donald Trump friends and donors. What a disgrace and completely shameful. And then, of course, there's the East Wing and the White House, demolished with barely any public notice or public process. To make way for what? A ballroom that'll cost up to $1 billion, funded by taxpayers and shady corporate donations, so that Donald Trump and his family can host balls and dinners and galas for himself, I'm sure, and for his friends and rich donors. What a shameful moment for our country, and just disturbing to see what he's doing at the White House. And we can't forget about the Kennedy Center. He not only tried to take over the board, of course, installing himself as chairman, but he placed his name on the building, turning a cultural institution, a memorial to a great man, a president, into some sort of warped vanity project to himself. Thank goodness for the courage of some and the courts in stopping these horrific and illegal and corrupt action. And now, of course, he's also pushing this triumphal arch between the Lincoln Memorial and Arlington National Cemetery. This arch, of course, when reporters are asked who the arch was for, Trump said, quote, "Me." This is a sad, pathetic, lonely man who's trying to turn America's monuments into monuments for himself. And in the process, he's destroying institutions and properties that belong not to him and his family, but to the American people. He's dishonoring our history. He's dishonoring our veterans. He's dishonoring a former great president. And he's dishonoring the American people. And of course, what's crazy is every single project is marked by corruption and actually incompetence. No bid contracts, as we know, unqualified companies, including campaign donors, and blatant violations of the law halted by the courts. Donald Trump claims to be the biggest, most successful builder of all time, but he can't even refurbish a pool. Trump also likes to talk about vandals in DC and crime in DC and all the vandalism that he sees wherever he goes. Well, the biggest vandal in Washington, DC is the President of the United States. He's corrupt, he's incompetent, he's ripping off the taxpayer, he's obsessed with himself and only himself, and he's willing to destroy important American institutions for his own grievances and his own vanity and narcissism. He literally destroyed the East Wing. He doesn't care about real priorities of the American public. Now, we are investigating all of this, and I thank our Senate partners in their incredible work and investigations on these issues. Now, we want the contracts. We want the documents, the communications, the payments, the paper trails, and we're going to find out who is profiting from these projects and find all the grift and the waste. And of course, what Donald Trump and the administration should know is that we're just getting started. And with that, Senator, I yield back.
Thank you. Thanks, Representative Garcia, and thank you for your partnership in this effort. And we're going to be demanding the facts. We're going to want the evidence and documents, and we'll stop at nothing to get them. And together, we're going to make sure that we uncover this corruption, because it has costs. Corruption has costs and consequences for everyday Americans. And nobody knows better the importance of getting the facts than my good friend, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. I want to thank him for his leadership in battling the administration's grift and corruption. Particularly, I want to recognize the tremendous work he did just last week in bringing to light the new whistleblower allegations that the administration is once again performing shoddy work, cutting corners, and issuing no-bid contracts for millions of dollars at the Kennedy Center. Thank you for being here, Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Ranking Members Blumenthal and Garcia, for convening us here today to discuss monumental waste. If you want to see monumental waste, look no further than the Kennedy Center. Beginning last summer, whistleblowers came to me with documents showing that after President Trump had declared himself chairman, his hand-picked leadership team let FIFA occupy the entire campus for 3 weeks for a grand total of $0. Zero. That gift cost the center over $5 million in lost revenue, but it let the president hang a made-up FIFA Peace Prize around his neck. Invoices and receipts also showed a pattern of unprecedented spending on staff meals, jobs going to Trump World family and friends with no qualifications, and long-term stays at the ritzy Watergate Hotel for their new hires. So as ranking member of the Environment Public Works Committee and ex officio member of the center's board, I launched an investigation into the management of the Kennedy Center's finances. Since last November, more whistleblowers have come forward with documents that demonstrate even more corruption and self-dealing, from multiple no-bid contracts going to preferred contractors, to rushed jobs that need to be redone, to management telling staff to do whatever it takes and not to worry about the repercussions because we'll deal with the lawsuits later. And to what end? All this waste occurred in the service of gratifying the president's monumental ego. That meant delivering for him 2 dates, December 5th, when he'd take to the stage to accept his phony baloney Peace Prize, and December 7th, when he'd take the stage again as the self-appointed host of the Kennedy Center Honors. The columns rusting through fresh paint, the reflecting pool that may now have to be rebuilt, Trump's name appearing on the building less than 12 hours after an illegal board vote. None of this is an accident. Everything was rushed to make sure the monuments looked the way the president wanted. And now Americans are left to foot the bill for the shoddy work itself and for the still needed repairs never properly done. My fellow ex officio member, Representative Joyce Beatty, is here. She filed the lawsuit that forced President Trump's name off of President Kennedy's memorial, restored the statutory voting rights of ex officio members, and halted a complete closure of the entire center that looked more like a cover-up for their inability to run the place. So my work on the Kennedy Center continues, and I encourage all those with information to keep coming forward. My staff remains ready to meet with anyone in confidence and at your convenience. I'll also recognize that Norm Eisen, who was Joyce Beatty's lawyer in that matter, is here as well. So you guys are backstopped in that. As a ranking member of EPW with jurisdiction over public buildings, I'd be remiss not to mention other victims to the Trump cavalcade of corruption. You know the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool story, the peeling paint, the made-up claims of vandalism, the gash that grew with every retelling. What you may not know, that $1.8 million contract ballooned to a $14 million no-bid giveaway to Trump's preferred contractors, including a Palm Beach neighbor who has twice pled guilty to federal bribery and campaign finance violations. Same at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Last October, I wrote to President Trump regarding his illegal demolition of the East Wing for his vanity ballroom. First promised at $200 million in private donations. Its cost has now more than tripled, including a defeated attempt to fleece taxpayers out of $1 billion. Ranking Member Garcia and I led an amicus brief urging the court to stop construction of the billion-dollar ballroom without congressional approval. And now, turns out, there's more. The Washington Post has since reported that the White House awarded a $500 million no-bid contract routed through the executive residence. Conveniently, the place exempt from federal rules requiring competitive bidding. The Trump motto, don't like the rules, break them. Manufactured vandalism, bulldozed buildings, no-bid contracts. None of this is happening in isolation, and none of it's really about paint and plaster. It's a story of cronyism, corruption, and contempt for anyone who engages in oversight. It's the deliberate hollowing out of American institutions that are supposed to outlast any one man until there's nothing left of them but the name on the door. Or, if you don't like that name, just a tarp to cover it up. thank you very much to both of our co-chairs.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Whitehouse has already partially introduced the witnesses, but I'm going to do a more formal job, and I want to tell the witnesses and everybody here that Senator Whitehouse and I spent a lot of time in this hearing room. Rarely is it as packed as it is today when we have a formal hearing. So I want to thank everybody who is here, but also just to tell the witnesses, you may feel that this hearing is of lesser value because we're sitting down here instead of on the dais. We should be on the dais. This hearing should be bipartisan. Republicans should be doing what we're doing now, investigating this corruption and cronyism. But make no mistake that America is watching. In fact, our investigative hearings have been watched on live stream by many multiples of the numbers of people who ordinarily watch the hearings held in this hearing room. So thank you to everybody who is watching remotely today. We're very honored to be joined today by Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, who has represented the 3rd District of Ohio since 2013. She's here today to discuss her role as an ex officio member of the Kennedy Center's Board of Trustees and her successful efforts to fight the Trump administration's attempts to rename the Kennedy Center. Ben Folds is a world-renowned songwriter and musician who spent 8 years as artistic advisor to the National Symphony Orchestra at the Kennedy Center. He stepped down from that role in February 2025 after President Trump fired many members of the Kennedy Center's formerly bipartisan board and had himself elected chairman. Jimmy Shaughnessy is a combat veteran whose great-grandparents served in both world wars. They are buried in Arlington. He is here to share his family's story and how Trump's proposed arch would honor or dishonor his great-grandparents and so many other brave veterans who are buried at Arlington. John Gollinger is a democracy advocate and public citizen, where he has led groundbreaking research uncovering the corruption and grift epidemic in Donald Trump's ballroom pay-to-play. Ambassador Norm Eisen, retired ambassador, is the co-founder and board member of Democracy Defenders Action and co-founder and executive chair of Democracy Defenders Fund. He has combated the Trump administration's efforts to establish a $1.776 billion slush fund. I call it a thug fund for the benefit of the January 6th insurrectionists. He served as counsel to remove Trump's name from the Kennedy Center. He represented Olympian David Hearn in his criminal case regarding the reflecting pool, and his testimony today will focus on anti-corruption efforts. So with that, Congresswoman Beatty, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ranking Members, Senator Richard Blumenthal and Congressman Robert Garcia and other members of this distinguished hearing. I'd also be remiss if I did not thank my colleague and ex officio board member Sheldon Whitehouse for his comments. Today's hearing, Monumental Waste, on how Donald Trump is spending taxpayers' dollars on national landmarks like the Kennedy Center. My testimony will focus on fighting back against Trump's unlawful renaming of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, the only living memorial for President Kennedy. It's about whether powerful people can rewrite history, seize public institutions, and silence dissent. The unlawful renaming of the Kennedy Center is another example of Trump's disregard of the rule of law and our Constitution. I became the face of this fight because someone had to stand up. At the end of the day, it wasn't about fighting for myself. I was fighting for the rule of law and for an institution that belongs to the American people. Trump began his takeover of the Kennedy Center by handpicking his sycophants to the Board of Trustees to rubber stamp his plans. By law, certain members of Congress serve as ex officio members of the Kennedy Center's Board of Trustees, like myself. Trump then illegally stripped ex officio members of their rights to vote in board meetings. During the December 18th, 2025 virtual meeting, I was muted, silencing me when the vote occurred to change the name. On December 22nd, 2025, I filed the lawsuit, Beatty v. Trump, in federal court to remind the president that there are consequences for unlawful actions and that one cannot simply rewrite federal law. From December 2025 to March 2026, a series of filings and hearings occurred. I appeared before the Federal District Court Judge Christopher R. Cooper on March 12th, might add, that was my birthday, 2026. On May 30th, 2026, Judge Cooper ruled that the Kennedy Center trustees acted unlawfully when they renamed the institution to include Donald Trump's name. Further, the court reaffirmed separation of powers by stating that only Congress has the authority to rename the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Judge Cooper also ordered every reference to Trump's name to be removed, including the website, branding, transportation, and signage on the front of the building. On June 12, 2026, the day the sign was ordered to come down, I stood with hundreds of people at the Kennedy Center for approximately 11 hours as scaffolding and a tarp were erected. At 4 a.m. on Saturday, June 13th, I witnessed the name had been removed. In addition to the name being removed, Judge Cooper also blocked Trump's planned two-year shutdown of the Kennedy Center. Justice prevailed. No longer silenced, no longer prevented from attending and voting in board meetings, the name had come down. The Kennedy Center is the home to the National Symphony Orchestra and thousands of artists, performers, students, advisors, and families like many here today, especially Mr. Ben Folds. Once it became apparent that the Trump and the board's unlawful actions led artists to canceling and refusing to play the Kennedy Center, it appeared that Trump decided that his own personal ego outweighed the thousands of artists and the workers who rely on the Kennedy Center for their livelihood. The court's most recent ruling made clear that the Trump administration must explain two things by July 31st: why the Kennedy Center remains covered by a massive tarp, and what is he covering up, and what concrete plans they have to keep the building open. I'd like to convey my appreciation to the House Oversight Committee and the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations for holding this hearing today. In these difficult times, American people deserve better than a president who is more focused on slapping his name on buildings than helping people lower the cost of groceries. Yes, I would have preferred to be here talking about affordability and helping working families rather than discussing Trump's vanity projects and petty acts of defiance. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman B, and thank you for your great work. I want to just say, ordinarily, we would have a presiding officer sternly gaveling down the applause. But actually, there's something very refreshing and inspiring about your approval, and thank you, Congresswoman B, for that excellent testimony. Mr. Folds? Mr. Folds, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committees. Thank you for the invitation to speak for you today. My name is Ben Folds, and I've been a recording artist and a touring artist for 30 years, and half my career has been focused on the orchestra. In 2017, I was appointed the first artistic advisor to the National Symphony Orchestra, NSO, at the Kennedy Center here in Washington, D.C., where my role was essentially curatorial. We sold out shows for 8 years straight without compromising the orchestra's integrity. Contemporary artists like Sarah Bareilles, John Batiste, Regina Spektor, as well as country artist Jamie Johnson, all played their first orchestra shows with us and then carried those scores to perform with other orchestras around the country, because it's a common challenge for orchestras across the U.S. to bring in younger audiences, and their survival depends on this. So we saw an opportunity there. This is one of the many things that the Kennedy Center and the NSO can lead as a mission-based federal arts institution, not a run-of-the-mill profit institution. Just as our efforts were beginning to make a difference across the country, in February 2025, the Trump administration staged a brutal board takeover. For the first time in history, a president took control of the Kennedy Center's programming and messaging. The firewall between politics and the center's nonprofit mission was eliminated. The result was a hyper-politicized environment. Gone was the apolitical sanctuary the Kennedy Center always provided. During the first Trump administration, when I was appointed, I never heard politics discussed in any meetings or gatherings at the center. Everyone involved, including the Trump board, knew we were there to create, educate, and showcase art for all Americans, not to further a political agenda. I think most of us understand that when you politicize art, you got propaganda. With the new partisan toxic environment under the current administration, I could not trust that artists I booked at the Kennedy Center would be safe from retribution if they said or sung something that might displease the president or his political lackeys who now controlled the center. I could not perform my job or the mission I was brought on to do, and for this reason, with great sadness, I had no choice but to resign. These days, if an artist agrees to perform at the Kennedy Center, they risk being seen as explicitly endorsing the Trump administration and all of its policies. Declining an invitation to perform at the Kennedy Center will have an equal and opposite political effect. There may be certain artists who will thrive in this environment, comedians come to mind, but most want nothing to do with it and will choose to create and perform their art elsewhere, and they are, and audiences are following. If you take the case of DC-based artist Yasmin Williams, who decided even after the takeover to honor a prior offer to perform at the Kennedy Center's Millennium Stage. Exercising her First Amendment rights, Yasmin had publicly taken issue with the then center's Trump-loyal executive director, and during her performance, she was aggressively interrupted and heckled, prompting the center's workers union to call for an investigation into credible allegations that the then executive director incited and even paid these hecklers to harass her. So Yasmin had to endure heckling from extremists on the right, while also getting grief from the left for even showing up to perform, treated as she was a scab crossing a picket line. And you have to marvel at anyone who would believe they could run the business of the Kennedy Center with no prior arts administration experience at all. And we can see the result has been dwindling audiences, the exit of the Washington National Opera, the dismantling of the national public education outreach programs, and the demoralization of our National Symphony Orchestra. Many of the NSO privately believe that their jobs are in danger. So the takeover hobbled the Kennedy Center, broke its once proven successful business model, and disrespected its original core mission. The unlawful addition of the president's name to the front of the building sent the Kennedy Center into further spiral. And while his name has been removed, thank you, the center's future and the future of the NSO is still uncertain. Our beloved institution needs to be resuscitated. We need a vibrant Kennedy Center whose leadership once again understands how to run its business, who will keep politics checked at the doors, who will ensure that only the most qualified arts administrators are in charge, because we can see the damage that is caused when arts are run by politicians rather than people. I greatly appreciate you hearing me out. I can only hope your concerns can find their ways to the hearts and minds of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle who seem absent today. I used to work with them on various issues, bringing people into the arts, and they're absent now. Here's hoping that we can get that spirit back. I'd like to yield back myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foltz, and for all your work. I now recognize Mr. Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate your efforts in keeping this issue in the public eye. I speak to you today as a private citizen, a Marine Corps combat veteran, son of a veteran, and grandson of generations of combat veterans spanning nearly 200 years. Buried in Section 60 in Arlington National Cemetery, my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother. He, a combat veteran who led the charge on horseback against Pancho Villa and would go on to serve in both World Wars. She, a combat nurse who tended to wounded young men during World War II. They didn't question whether they should serve, only how long they would be permitted to. As a young Marine, I was impressed by their example. Their commitment to service and country became values I carried through my enlistment and combat tour, a tour in which I lost friends before I could learn their full names. Now, potentially, a gigantic arch will cast a shadow on my resting family, friends, and leathernecks as vanity is rewarded with a momentous symbol of selfishness. A 250-foot arch is a profound disruption and insult at the entrance to sacred ground. The space at the gates of Arlington Cemetery exists as a threshold, a transitory passage between service and burial. To preserve that integrity, it must remain open and unobstructed. The origin of this arch was not born from conversations and contemplation with military members, veterans, their families, or the entities that serve these populations. It was not a discussion with the American people, not a discussion for the American people, but rather an attempt to gain the attention of one man. Service members and their families navigate many transitions throughout a military career and beyond. The transition out of the military is among the most dangerous periods a service member will face. That final transition, from service to eternal rest, it is not theirs to manage. It is ours. It falls to us, the living, to receive our wounded and our dead with the highest esteem and care. An arch is not what they need. Who is this arch for? Is it for me? The president has already answered that question, and yes, it is for him. This arch would obstruct the sight line of the Arlington Memorial Bridge, a symbol of unity and reconciliation, connecting those divided by war and grief. Rather than honoring that unity, it deepens a wound that has not fully healed. Hasty construction is no path to a monument worthy of this nation. Previous memorials were shaped by extensive public input and rigorous agency review, ensuring that the final design reflected our shared values. This proposal has had neither. Others have raised the serious safety hazards of placing a monument in a roundabout at a high-traffic intersection, consistent with this administration's pattern of placing pedestrians in harm's way. Every view from our contemplated landscape will be dominated by an overt symbol of hasty, selfish celebration. Approaching drivers will have their view of Arlington obstructed as they gawk at the mammoth sterling white blocks of stamped facade. Once atop the observation deck, there are two choices. Gawk with an amusement-like stare at the cotton-bright gravestones diligently plotted across the hillside, or turn your back on our fallen comrades and take in the stunning views. The administration has chosen to ignore the established protocol and precedent for this project, which is allowing Congress to write into law the authorization for construction of a memorial structure, instead of rubber stamping every aspect of this project, contradicting the very purpose of pre-established criteria meant to determine a structure's path. The precedent cited for this project is beyond flawed and outdated. 100 years old and 2 pillars apart is hardly sturdy footing for an arch. This project does not honor any living or deceased patriot of ours. Funding has been stripped from the Veterans Affairs, the National Park Service, and the Department of Interior, degrading the capacity of these very agencies that provide direct services to veterans and their families. If we are to truly support the men and women who serve in uniform, direct this money to those agencies. How will this project be funded? With our tax dollars? With redirected entrance fees from parks across the country? Anonymous donations flowing into another undisclosed fund? We deserve an answer. This is not political, this is eternal. No one needs this arch. It is inappropriate, unnecessary, insulting. It is a waste of our land, our time, and our money. Thank you.
Thank you for that testimony, and thank you for your service, Mr. Shaughnessy. Mr. Gollinger?
Good afternoon. My name is John Gollinger. I'm the democracy advocate with Public Citizen, where I investigate corporate influence on government and elections. The week before the wrecking ball smashed into the East Wing, a room of around 100 people gathered in the White House for a candlelight dinner. They were there so President Trump could thank them for donating millions of dollars to fund his favorite pet project, the White House Golden Ballroom, and also to hear about another of his pet projects. We saw him holding up the toy arch earlier. That was at this same dinner. The monumental arch to himself. These ballroom dinner donors were prominent lobbyists, bigwig corporate execs, current and wannabe billionaires, all kinds of government influence peddlers and favor seekers. But at the center of it all, at the head table, closest to the president, was the person responsible for raising the money. So I'm here today to focus on following the money, and I think that starts with the person and the people who are raising all of this corrupt money. That person is sitting at the center of the secretive fundraising machine that a federal judge in the ballroom case referred to as a Rube Goldberg contraption. That person is Meredith O'Rourke. Here she is laughing all the way to the bank, laughing at pulling one over on the American people. It's President Trump's fundraiser in chief. A profile of Ms. O'Rourke last fall in a Florida publication called Influence Magazine, appropriately titled, reported that she doesn't like the spotlight. She doesn't like it shined on herself or her work. I think that's for good reason. Doing what I'm doing right now, and I hope you do a lot more of in the days and years to come, exposes the secretive, shady schemes that Ms. O'Rourke and her friends have employed to raise all this money for the projects we've heard about today. The ballroom, Freedom 250, the Garden for American Heroes, trashing of the Kennedy Center, probably the Arch, probably more. Central to these schemes has been cloaking Ms. O'Rourke's fundraising for all these pet projects with the veneer of legitimacy and secrecy by funneling the money through tax-exempt charitable organizations. Some of them long-standing groups like the Trust for the National Mall, which has served as the money funnel for the $400+ million for the ballroom. Some of the money for the Freedom 250 has been funneled through the National Park Foundation. The template for both of these projects was the same. Hijack a legitimate group, funnel money from donors who want or have gotten something from government, and allow them to be both tax-exempt and secret. Steer the money to Donald Trump's piggy bank so he can dole the contracts out to friends, no-bid contracts in many or most cases, and spend wild sums to build monuments to waste, greed, and corruption. With my written testimony that I submitted for the record is the secret document Public Citizen obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request that lays out the ballroom project funding scheme in black and white. It says donors who want to be anonymous can be. It says money from tobacco companies that typically the Park Service and its charities can't take can be taken, and more. We did a report right after the ballroom, the East Wing was knocked down, that found hundreds of billions of dollars in government contracts went to the people, the companies that donated to the ballroom. Most of them also had federal enforcement actions pending or dropped. We did another one recently that found that the majority of the donors got more government contracts to the tune of $50 billion since they made their donations. And most of them, 16 out of 27 companies, are facing federal enforcement actions or have gotten them suspended. That's the donors we know about. What I'm more scared of is the donors we don't. But we will smoke them out, and we will find out. Last month, along with the Revolving Door Project, Public Citizen analyzed the contracts and the corporate money related to Freedom 250. That's a Trump-aligned LLC, limited liability company, created and housed inside the National Park Foundation, where conveniently Ms. O'Rourke was installed on the board in March. We found 20 corporate sponsors funded Freedom 250. This is ExxonMobil, Oracle, Lockheed Martin, Palantir, United Airlines. Undisclosed sums contributed, no oversight. In another case, Ms. O'Rourke and her associates have simply invented their own tax-exempt charity out of whole cloth. According to the pledge agreement prepared for prospective donors, the National Garden of American Heroes Foundation was established this year to fund 2 Trump projects, the development of a Garden of Heroes at West Potomac Park and the dramatic expansion of the East Potomac Park Golf Course. The pledge agreement lists Ms. O'Rourke and her associate as the contacts and states that they will seek to retain the anonymity of anonymous donors. What all these sketchy schemes have in common is this: Corporate and billionaire donors who want something from government benefit. Meredith O'Rourke and her lobbyist friends who help her raise the money benefit. The charities funneling the money benefit. Donald Trump benefits. The American people lose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bollinger. Thank you for the work that you're doing and your organization, and I'm turning now to Ambassador Iden.
Ranking members Blumenthal and Garcia, members of the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations and the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, thank you for convening this forum and inviting me and all of us to appear today. My name is Norman Eisen. I'm the co-founder of Democracy Defenders Action. Since commencing my law practice in Washington, D.C. 35 years ago, I've worked on ethics, anti-corruption, and democracy in the United States and around the world, including as the White House ethics czar and as the United States ambassador to the Czech Republic. And in all those 35 years, I have never seen anything remotely like this. We are experiencing unprecedented corruption in plain sight. As Donald Trump moves through his lame duck presidency, he's desperately trying to rewrite his legacy. He's defacing the people's landmarks, and he's carving his own name into the people's institutions. That includes civil cases that I have the privilege to work on among our over 300 matters at Democracy Defenders Action and Democracy Defenders Fund. Cases like the Kennedy Center case or the demolition of the East Wing. I'm going to talk about those cases and why our monuments, our public parks, and our public lands belong to the American people, not to any president and not to Donald Trump. Although I'm also a member of the legal team representing a criminal defendant, Davey Hearn, in the Reflecting Pool case, I will not be discussing that matter today. We've just had a trial date set in that case. Let's begin with the East Wing of the White House. As we've discussed, the president tore down part of the People's House to build himself a $600 million gold-plated ballroom, and then he dumped the wreckage on the People's Park. Now we have more than 35,000 cubic yards of demolition debris hauled into East Potomac Park, land Congress set aside to be held forever, for the recreation and pleasure of the people. The East Potomac Golf Links is their public park where families go. They use both. Trump dumped this waste with no environmental review, with no historic preservation review. Is it any wonder that months later, the Park Service's own testing found elevated lead, arsenic, and mercury in the park? And just this past Friday, the government admitted to a federal judge that it never finished testing that soil before declaring it safe. I'm very proud that our team joins Democracy Forward and Lowland Associates in representing the DC Preservation League and local residents in court, and we do that work in our sister organization, Democracy Defenders Fund. Second, you've heard today from my wonderful client and friend, Congresswoman Beatty, that Congress named the Kennedy Center for President John F. Kennedy. This president, Donald Trump, tried to remake that, to etch his own name on the facade. We've learned that that's illegal. We're going back to court. to deal with that TARP. The name has come off. And if there's one principle that's been established in today's testimony and in our case, is that no one mutes Representative Beatty. I've been up here for 35 years. I'm not really accustomed to the applause, but I love it. It's a lot of pressure as it builds for each additional witness. The Kennedy Center case we're very proud to do. We believe in doing these cases in teams. Very proud that the Washington Litigation Group and Nathaniel Zelinsky, who's also here today, is co-counsel with us in that case. There is so much more that we could talk about, and I look forward to discussing in response to your questions another form of vandalism, that $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund. Perhaps the ultimate landmark of our nation is our Constitution. And by making a deal with himself and trying to establish a slush fund and an endowment for insurrectionists past and future, he violated the Constitution's case and controversy clause. We were so proud to represent 35 bipartisan former federal judges who went to court, who stopped him, and who built a different kind of a landmark. Judge Williams' opinion saying that in the United States, the law is king, none other. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ambassador. We're going to have a 5-minute round of questions, and we're going to be hopefully somewhat strict on the 5 minutes because I want to make sure that all of our colleagues have a chance to ask questions. I'll begin. And by the way, Ambassador, there's no ethics czar now in the White House, is there?
I think there's a czar who's in charge of destroying ethics, not defending them.
The ethics czar is an ethics czar in charge of destroying ethics and morality, not protecting it. You know, I think the challenge that we face here is making sure that Americans understand that corruption, whether it's no-bid contracts or self-enrichment or favoring pals and donors, has costs. It has costs in ballooning the bills for these projects and in cratering the quality of the work that's done. So corruption is not just an abstract issue of morality or ethics. It has real costs to taxpayers. And Mr. Gollinger, I was really interested in the research that your organization has done. The ballroom was supposed to be privately funded. As a matter of fact, now hundreds of millions of dollars are going to be diverted from the Secret Service to pay for this $600 gilded boondoggle. But there are also private donors who have been awarded $50 billion in taxpayer-funded contracts in just 6 months. That is a startling revelation. Many of these ballroom donors made donations while facing federal enforcement action. They had regulatory action pending against them, in addition to receiving contracts for work that profited them. The SEC dismissed charges against some of these companies. Meta made a donation while facing CFPB investigations and FTC litigation. Coinbase made a donation while the SEC dismissed charges against them. Tell me what you think about the impact of these donations on law enforcement that protects taxpayers in our country.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Well, I worked in law enforcement before I came to public citizen in 2023. I spent 3 years in the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, and I went in because of a public corruption scandal, I was a lawyer, but I'd never worked in law enforcement. I was hired to head up public corruption investigations there. And what I learned in my 3 years, and we did some good cases, good meaning bad corruption that we uncovered and prosecuted, was that in San Francisco, which is a little city with a lot of money, in every city in this country, in the federal government, in every state, the number one corruption crime is procurement fraud, i.e. corrupt contracts, right? I'm sure as you well know from your experience. And that is because, as was famously said by a bank robber in the 1800s, why does he rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Government contracts are juicy targets for thieves and juicy targets for corrupt government officials and these sort of hangers-on and associates, as I've been alluding to and discussing. You can figure out how to steer those contracts to the people they want to raise money from. And that's what we're trying to see if actual deals were made. I don't have evidence before you today, but I also, unlike when I was a prosecutor and an investigator, I don't have this power of search warrant. But if you are the chair of this subcommittee next year, you will have that subpoena power. So I will lastly just say, when contracts are given to donors as pay to play, it means the costs of government services go up, taxpayers pay more, and good, honest businesses pay the price. If you want to play by the rules, you end up losing out, and that's wrong.
And we will use that subpoena power, both Representative Garcia and myself, if we are fortunate enough to have it next year. You know, I went out to the reflecting pool at the end of last week, and my heart broke. We've all been to the reflecting pool. We know it's a historic site, the civil rights demonstrations. It's also a place where visitors go, an iconic symbol of the greatest nation in the history of the world. It reflects America. It reflects the Lincoln Memorial, where Abe Lincoln must be turning over in his grave, Honest Abe, and the Washington Monument. And, you know, the destruction of these kinds of symbols of America have real resonance, and I wanted you to be here, Mr. Shaughnessy, because you reflect America. Our veterans reflect America. Our veterans have never been consulted about the building of this arch. I wanted you to be here, your face and voice, since veterans have had no representation in this decision that will vitally affect Arlington Cemetery. What does it say to you that this president is constructing an arch without consulting any of the community that will be directly affected by it as they go to visit their loved ones who are buried in this sacred place?
Thank you, sir. It's a very tall order to represent all the veterans in the country. I do my best. There's a couple of different reasons why I find this so insulting, is that there's already a process in place that ensures that monuments that are constructed represent all of America. We have a lot of different opinions, and that process has worked. It's worked for previous memorials, previous war memorials. Every other monument in DC has gone through such a process. And now to bypass that process, it tells us, one, it reminds the service member they're expendable, their opinions don't matter, and that the commander-in-chief can do what they please. By putting, it's the location. Doesn't matter what goes there. If it's a massive structure that obstructs the view, it's because none of the details have been thought through. This is incredibly hasty. I've been at the National Capital Planning Commission meetings, and these folks have not thought about the details. So let me just highlight the noise that's required to complete a project of this size. The digging and the bouldering and the pouring of concrete and the trucks, the thousands of them, the cranes that will tower 300 feet high, the porta potties that will be lined up for the workers, the sewage trucks that will empty these porta potties and refill them. It's a carnival of trucks that will circulate around this roundabout in front of the only entrance to Arlington. It's infuriating. How can anyone conduct a remembrance ceremony with all of this noise and distractions happening around them? And that's just during the construction phase. These folks who want to build this arch think of this as an amusement. It was even said so at the last National Capital Planning Commission, that the amusement at the state fair of folks visiting the Arch was one of the most attended portions of the fair. And that's what it is. It's an amusement to them. Our service members are willing to give up everything. They're willing to give up their time, their lives, time with their family, and the administration is willing to consider poured concrete and rebarb and a stamped facade. He can place marble in his bathroom, but he can't consider a marble structure outside of Arlington Cemetery.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Representative Garcia. The Senate is having a vote at 5:15, so I may have to run. I'll leave you in charge if that's okay when I have to go. And after Representative Garcia, we'll turn to, we've been joined by a couple of our Senate colleagues. We have great representation from the House, and we'll get everybody in.
Thank you, Senator. And I want to, before I begin the question, just real briefly, I do want to thank our Ranking Member Huffman, who's here, our partners at Natural Resources, obviously, have doing incredible work protecting America's monuments and treasures. So thank you for being here. Also, just want to also add to Representative Beatty, truly heroic work that you've done at the Kennedy Center. So just want to personally, on behalf of Oversight Democrats, thank you again for being here and for your incredible work. And also, we'll recognize we have Councilmember Robert White, who is here, and of course our Shadow Senator, Ankit Jain, who is also here. So thank you both for being here and for your representation. We obviously have a lot to discuss today, and again, it's outrageous for a president to put monuments ahead of himself. To put monuments to himself ahead of the American people, and of course, the affordability crisis. Now, we want to take a look at each of these projects because they tell us so much about Donald Trump and his vanity and narcissism. And of course, it tells us a lot about corruption. Now, we've seen, of course, the images already of the reflecting pool, just the horrific shoddy job that's happened. But it's important to talk about who actually is doing some of this work. Now, this is J.J. Carafaro, of course, a neighbor of President Trump's, who actually resides just right next to Mar-a-Lago. Now, President Trump called JJ a fantastic man. He's a major Trump donor, by the way. He gave President Trump $250,000 in 2020. And he previously pled guilty to corruption and campaign finance violations. This guy right here. Now, this guy got a $1.7 million contract to install a nanobubble filtration system, which has been a total and complete disaster, as the president would say. It is a shame, it is disgusting that Donald Trump is enriching donors and friends by using America's monuments. Now, Mr. Gollinger, we know the White House claims they weren't involved in the contract. I mean, shocking that he would, of course, get the contract, but the facts look pretty obvious. Would you say this is an example of potential corruption that we should be investigating in the Senate and the House?
I would say if it were my case, I would be opening an inquiry into this potential corruption in a hot minute.
And Oversight Democrats have. We've asked Mr. Gollinger and his company a series of questions, and that will continue. Now, we're taking on Trump's corruption at the monuments and the corruption happening in the private sector here as well. Who were these donors? Why did they finance these projects? Why did they finance the ballroom? Why are they involved in the Arch? The list goes on, and we're going to get those answers. But there's other important issues here. President Trump's vanity projects in D.C. show also his dishonesty and all of the lies in the administration. Now, the contractors President Trump used to renovate the pool were clearly incompetent. We've all seen the images, the lining at the bottom of the pool, and then the embarrassment of the lies of the president himself, essentially saying that vandalism is what caused all the problems. Now, we've seen, of course, one of the president's really unhinged true social posts that he likes to do in the middle of the morning or the middle of the night. Now, this is, of course, a pretty long, unhinged rant, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But to summarize it, the President of the United States especially spends his time claiming that someone gutted the surface of the pool with a knife. He claims somehow that knife and somehow some chemicals that got poured into the pool is what caused this massive destruction of the pool, which they've had to, of course, now try to rebuild on multiple occasions. I mean, this is just blatant lies and an embarrassment to our country. Mr. Gollinger, has your administration actually produced any evidence of the president's claims?
Not that I've seen. And
Not a single one.
Not at all.
These lies are ridiculous. And now we have the U.S. DOJ, our Department of Justice, trying to prosecute innocent people who are looking at the pool, who, of course, are being arrested, who are being moved away, children, families, athletes, all because of the president's incompetence. Once again, the person that calls himself the best builder in history can't actually fix a pool here in the district. I also just want to say, Mr. Foltz, thank you for your testimony. We of course, our institution at the Kennedy Center is so important. Now, President Trump's allies claim that they took over the Kennedy Center to stop woke propaganda. Is that true?
He said it was woke and broke, which rhymes, and that's nice. No, I'm not really sure what that means, but I mean, our job at the Kennedy Center was to make sure every kid, especially that went there, saw themselves represented on stage. The Kennedy Center is the people's art institution. So if that's what woke is, then yeah, sure. I don't know what that means.
Exactly. And having been to the Kennedy Center to see some performances, they also claim that nobody was going to the Kennedy Center.
Yeah.
That it wasn't connecting with audiences. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely not. As I was saying in my testimony, I mean, we had straight sold out shows on our programs, and as far as I knew, at least a few years came up in the black there, meaning that they ran at a surplus, which is really, really impressive. And so, no, I think the Kennedy Center was going through some golden years, in my opinion.
Thank you. And finally, Congresswoman, I just want to thank you for being here again. I know that, President Trump kept saying that the board was rigged at the Kennedy Center, literally silenced you from speaking during the vote, if I'm not correct. And in response, of course, you led the lawsuit to fight and save the Kennedy Center. I want to close my questioning here. Just what went through your mind seeing this destruction, and after, of course, you won the suit with others on behalf of the Kennedy Center?
It was devastating. As I was sitting there, it was the first that I'm sitting there as a board member, as a U.S. member of Congress, and to be silenced. And so that was the first part of our journey in working with Norm and Nathaniel for the lawsuit. I also thought about all the performers, the artists, the people who work in the boxes, the people who sell tickets, and it's about jobs. And at this critical time in our country, when we're talking about affordability, when we're talking about putting food on the table, I thought about all of those folks, and they love their jobs. If you've ever been to the Kennedy Center, they do it with such grace and pride. So the fight wasn't about me. It was about it being unlawful. So I've always said consistently, it was about the rule of law. We cannot let individuals like Donald Trump get it twisted that he can do any and everything he wants without pushback. And it was about the arts. And being a board member, serving with Joe Kennedy when I first went on the board, it's the love of art for me, love of that institution, but it was really about the American people. It was much bigger than the Kennedy Center. While it was all about it, it was about jobs. It was about making people feel that there is still hope in this country and that people will still stand up and fight. And when we fight, we win.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Reed.
Well, thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Thank you, Congressman Garcia. Thank you all to our witnesses. First, I want to thank and salute Mr. Shaughnessy for his service in the United States Marine Corps. Thank you very much, and your continued connection. And I share your concern about the arch. It will desecrate Arlington National Cemetery. So thank you for your work. But let me ask Ambassador Eisen, one of the other proposals is to take West Potomac Park and make it the National Garden of American Heroes. I and I have this feeling that most of them will be donors to the Trump campaign, but that's beside the point. Oh, no. And then the other issue is taking the East Potomac Park and making it a golf course, which will not be, I think, accessible as it is today to the public. Could you give us the legal issues surrounding these things and what might be done to frustrate this strategy?
Thank you, Senator. On the utilization of these parks or the Kennedy Center or other public monuments, Congress has spoken, and it has dictated uses for these public places. Take, for example, putting in a Trump Country Club style golf course in the East Potomac Park. This is a piece of parkland where you have a historic public course that is truly a public course. When I go out there, you see people of all ages from every different part of DC and the larger areas, families, grandparents golfing with their kids. It's affordable, it's accessible, it's one of the first of its kind anywhere in the country, so it's also a landmark. Other public parks around the country have been built on that. It is a desecration to take that at great cost to the American people, because Donald Trump's corruption is something that we all pay for. To take that and to convert it to this kind of a Trump Country Club style course that we don't need, we don't want to pay for. We certainly don't want 35,000 cubic yards of toxic dirt there where children are playing, being dumped from the East Wing, destruction. So and that's why we've gone to court to address it in terms of this illegal dumping on the land and other related legal issues.
Well, thank you very, very much. I must confess, having flunked golf at West Point, I'm not the biggest golf fan, but I want to see that course maintained as a public course with access for everyone. And thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Ranking Member Huffman.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Garcia and Senator Blumenthal, for holding this important hearing and for inviting me to participate as the ranking Democrat on the House Natural Resource Committee, where we're working shoulder to shoulder with our Oversight Committee colleagues to bring some transparency and accountability to this mess. Every president thinks about their legacy, what they'll leave for the American people. Most of them try to earn one. Donald Trump is skipping that step. Instead, he's using his presidency as a huge grift to build himself vanity projects covered in lots of gold paint and to pay for it with other people's money, including a lot of our money. Now, earlier this month, the Natural Resources Committee Democrats released this 55-page report, From Vanity to Insanity. And it describes how President Trump hijacked America's 250th, turning it into an opportunity for raising and spending money in service of his own ego, his own political agenda, and in many cases, his own personal and family enrichment. While American service members die and the global economy sputters because of a wrong-headed and illegal war he has started, while working families struggle with the cost of living, the President of the United States is weirdly obsessed with picking out marble for his ballroom and pushing plans for a massive arch to honor himself. And he's paying for all of this with a combination of public money and also money from corporations who are vying for business from the Trump administration and foreign interests as well. So let's start with the public money. You know, when anyone in this room goes to a flagship park like Yosemite, most of the money that you pay for your entrance fee is supposed to stay there to help fix trails and repair facilities. The rest of that money, though, goes to fund smaller parks with fewer resources. And instead of allowing that to work as it should, Trump has diverted over $90 million of these shared entrance fees to prepare for for his vanity arch, to decorate the White House, and to fix up D.C. statues. And for many families, parks are the only affordable vacation option they have. But this summer, they are arriving to struggling parks, understaffed parks, unsafe parks in many ways because of Republican funding and staff cuts. And now on top of all of that, the president is siphoning off more parks money to spend on his vanity projects. So, Mr. Shaughnessy, you work with veterans in our national parks. Tell us what is happening this summer and what $90 million would have paid for if it had stayed in the park system where it belongs.
Certainly. Our parks and public lands are intended to showcase the democracy of our nation by setting aside accessible land and spaces for all people, citizens and visitors to our nation, for access. Our national parks are specifically for recreating and telling the story of America. The recreation and storytelling is managed by people, and people need assurances like job stability and adequate pay. Diverting fees from parks that collect them further jeopardizes the ability of park staff in those parks to facilitate safe operations and tell the complete and accurate story of our country. I was just recently in Shenandoah for 4 days, bringing my nephew on his first camping and hiking trip, and I saw 2 park rangers the entire time, at the gate and at the campground. The trails were washed out, trail signs were missing, the bathrooms were cleaned by the camp hosts, but the equipment was faulty and outdated. Wildlife were in the campground, grazing next to tents and cars. All of this makes camping and recreating less safe and less inviting. These spaces should be accessible to all, regardless of outdoor recreation experience or their comfort with roughing it. Parks are not just for the super fit and terribly rugged. They're for everyone. Park staff are there as a guide and a symbol of safety. Those park staff deserve to have adequate pay and adequate budget to address the needs of the unit they manage.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy. Now let's talk about the corporate money, these so-called donations, although it seems to me donations is a generous word for checks that are written, for example, by a company that just happens to have a merger decision sitting on the president's desk. These are secret, tax-deductible payments to the president's monument fund. And in return, the donors, massive corporations like ExxonMobil, Oracle, and Palantir, get access to the White House. One of them hasn't reported, only one of them has reported a dime on their lobbying disclosures of all of this dark money. So, Mr. Gollinger, Public Citizen's been tracking these corporate donors. Of all the companies writing these checks, which one has the most to gain based on your investigation, and what is it that is sitting on the administration's desk right now?
Right. Well, that's a hard question because of the secrecy, right? So from the contract, we know they're secret donors. So we don't know what we don't know yet. But from the ones we do know, of the 27 corporations that have been identified as donating to the ballroom, I would single out Next Era Energy. So this energy company is already massive, just announced a massive $67 billion merger with Dominion to become largest energy utility around, and that would potentially be a monopoly that would raise rates. So that decision whether to approve that merger by Federal Energy Regulatory Commission or to challenge it through antitrust in the DOJ run by Todd Blanche, who reports, as we all know, to Donald Trump, I fear is effectively a done deal because of the money. So we, and Public Citizen and others, are challenging it. It's being challenged in multiple states. I would also single out Lockheed Martin, which has massive government contracts, already has received tens of billions, but of course, as a defense contractor, stands to gain tens of billions more because of the massive military funding the president's trying to jam through for his Iran war.
Thank you, Mr. Gollinger. As I wrap up, let me say, if the White House is watching, you're not going to get away with this. We have more documents, we have more whistleblowers, and in the months and weeks to come, the American people are going to see all of this. There will be a full accounting. I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Senator Blumenthal. Congressman Garcia, it's been good to work with you on Epstein projects and other priorities. And I particularly want to follow up with Congressman Huffman's remarks because they touch on the parks, and these cuts to the parks are hitting our communities like a wrecking ball. And in particular, it seems to me, and I want to direct this conversation to you, Mr. Shaughnessy, the Park Service should have used that money that has been wasted to do hazardous fuels cleanup and reduce the risk of wildfires to protect visitors and local communities. These fires that we're seeing in the West are not your grandfather's fires. They're bigger, they're hotter, they're hitting our communities like a wrecking ball. And this summer alone, wildfires have forced the closure of Oregon's Painted Hills National Monument because the park staff doesn't have the resources they need to protect our treasures. That's really what's at stake. They're filching this money to take from our treasures. Now, Oregonians, the people Senator Merkley and I are honored to represent, have been left literally as a result of this negligence in the line of fire, all because Trump has filched the money for his vanity projects that ought to go to protecting our communities. Here's my question. The Parks Conservation Association that you know works so well with local communities to support projects and policies that make our national parks safer. How has the Trump pursuit of vanity derailed projects that we need to protect American communities in Oregon and around the country during the wildfire season?
Yes, sir. Thank you. In 2014, I spent some time on the fire line with BLM and out of Klamath Falls, so I'm deeply familiar with the landscape and the fire needs of Oregon and Eastern Washington. And what I can say is that any dollar that is spent on new construction projects from fee collecting parks is a dollar that cannot be spent on enhancing the firefighting ability of that entity and unit that receives the money. These units base their annual budget on fee dollars, and if that budget has a bunch of zeros and question marks, wildfire preparedness will at best stay stagnant and at worst decline. The best way to fight fire is prevention. By the time the fire crew arrives, it's already too late. Smokey told us that only you can prevent forest fires. And it's absolutely true. In a national park, everyone plays a role in ensuring fire does not start or spread. Every ranger is given some degree of fire training, and there are daily rules and tasks all uniformed personnel have to accomplish to prevent fire from starting. When the fire crew arrives, it's suppression time. Diverting fees can impact the ability to pay staff. Without paid staff, those folks will need to find other employment, thus removing the knowledge and experience of fire prevention. In addition to the staff, the visitors have a role in preventing wildfire, and those visitors cannot be properly informed if there are not staff there to inform them on how to prevent fires from starting. Any dollar diverted from a national park to a new construction project is furthering the harm of these increasing wildfires.
Well, Mr. Shaughnessy, first of all, you're being way too logical for the Trump administration. And the point really is we have to get the message out. And we want to work with you because you're making a big difference. And I don't think it's just Oregon that's going to be hit by this fire wrecking ball. It's going to be all over the West. We just appreciate your leadership. Let's give Mr. Shaughnessy a big round of applause. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Norton.
I strongly oppose President Trump's attempt to make the District of Columbia in his image, including his militarizing of the streets, a takeover of the Kennedy Center, demolition of the East Wing, installation of permanent fencing at Lafayette Park, transformation of West Potomac Park into a statue garden, and construction of an arch. I strongly oppose his redevelopment of East Potomac Park. While the Gulf Coast there needs investment, it must remain affordable and accessible for all golfers. Furthermore, federal law requires the park to quote, be forever held and used as a park for the recreation and pleasure of people, end quote. The park, which is beloved by residents of the nation's capital, region, and visitors, must remain available for public recreation, including walking and running, biking, picnicking, and fishing. The administration is also must immediately remove the more than 35,000 cubic yards of toxic debris which the East Potomac Wing is dumped there. Mr. Shaughnessy, what would be lost by Trump's redevelopment of East Development Park?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So I will try my best to answer this from my personal experience visiting our national parks in DC. Our public lands and spaces are to be public. Golf is a very popular sport. It has a hefty price tag to pay with the clubs, the gear, the shoes, the time. It's very expensive. Allowing a public course gives people operating on a budget the opportunity to play a sport at an affordable price. Allowing them to access at a reduced cost furthers the possibility they can improve their game, maybe enter a tournament and compete. Seizing public land for private interest is reminiscent of Robert Moses, and we're still dealing with harmful effects from that. If privatized, certain portions of this population will not be able to afford entry, and maybe that's the intent.
Thank you.
Senator Merkley.
Thank you all very much, and all of you who are attending for coming together to talk about the egocentric projects of this president and how it's betraying the very values of our nation. But first, Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton, I know you're retiring in January. I want to thank you very much for your decades of service advocating for the District of Columbia. Thank you.
I'm so glad we were able to honor you here in the Senate, Congresswoman Norton.
You know, I was here in D.C. for the 200th anniversary of our nation, and I don't know how that's possible because I'm not even 50 years old yet, so how did that happen? But I came here as an intern for Senator Hatfield, and it was such a joyous summer of America coming together with no partisan divisions and the celebration of the American heritage on the mall all year long. And the mood couldn't have been more different from this summer, where Trump basically ruined the national celebration of our values by turning it into a partisan, self-serving affair. And it's just, he sucked all of the color and joy out of that national celebration, just like, and I was thinking symbolically how I was reading how the color in the reflecting pool, the blue, had turned to gray, and thought, well, that's symbolic of really the whole affliction of this president on the national mood. And in particular, it's so offensive. We've talked about these ego projects and how much they're costing and that they're not approved by Congress, and he's using slush funds to achieve them and all of that. But I want to talk for just a moment about a piece of this, and that's his putting his image on coins, on park passes, as well as the Kennedy Center, and why that is just so offensive. You know, our founders said, there's King George, and he puts his name on everything because he's a king. And it's all about him. And power flows through the king down to the people. But we don't do that in the United States of America. Our founders were very saying, no, we don't do that because here power flows up from the people through their electeds to achieve that vision of government of, by, and for the people. Do you all find it offensive that he put his vision on the park passes? Well, amen. It sure is, and it's like, because it represents two things. One, he's an authoritarian promoting himself rather than celebrating the values of our nation on our 250th anniversary. And the second aspect of this is just like he doesn't care about our parks. So he's the last person who should ever appear on a park pass. And so I do have a bill that prohibit partisan park passes. It says no sitting elected or president can appear on a park pass. Let's get the wildlife back on the park passes. And then he's putting his image on a coin. And that really is something emperors and kings do, not leaders of democratic republics. And I do find it kind of ironic that it's a fake gold coin. And in that way, maybe it represents so much about this president and his fake values. But nonetheless, his image does not belong on a coin. No president has done that. No sitting president has done it while he's serving. And we even had law that said you can't put your image on a coin, but it had a little loophole in it because it just said on one side, and it's been interpreted to mean, well, if you can put it, you can't put it on one side, you can put it on the other side. So that's what the administration is saying. And so my Change Corruption Act would ban any repeat and stop this coin from being distributed. So I realize it's symbolic, but it's symbolic of something fundamental to our nation, that our public spaces are for the public, and our leaders take the power from the people, not the other way around. Let's restore the vision of government of, by, and for the people. And I really intended to invite you, Ambassador, to comment if you'd like on my diatribe.
The distinction between the United States, which was born in the rejection of kings, and other countries who put living monarchs on their coins speaks to the spirit of the law, Senator, including the Thayer Amendment, which is one of the laws that you're referring to. And whatever the precise legalities, no prior president would have imagined flying in the face of that meaning and purpose and history of our laws. So it is yet another offense. I will say it is very fortunate. The American people see this, and they understand that this is a presidency that is not about them bringing down their costs, fighting corruption, and delivering competency. We've got a cost crisis that's driven by a competency and corruption crisis. And we will all be able to see that when the fake gold coin is out there.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Next up is Representative Krishnamurthy.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you to the witnesses. I'd like to start first with a quick game that captures just how absurd the vanity projects have become. Mr. Gollinger, I want to ask you a question. Which leader named a brand new class of warships after himself, a move so unprecedented and absurd that none of his predecessors even considered or proposed doing the same? Here are your choices: Donald Trump, Muammar Gaddafi, or Turkmenbashi?
I'm going to take a leap and say Donald Trump.
You are correct. Who put his own portrait in our country's passports? Trump, Gaddafi, or Turkmenbashi?
I'm going to take another long guess and say Donald Trump.
You're correct. It was President Trump. Even Turkmen dictator Turkmenbashi, a man who famously renamed the months of the year after himself, did not do the same. Last question. Which leader wanted to add a 60-foot granite monument of himself carved into the side of a mountain? Trump, Gaddafi, or Turkmenbashi?
That one I know is Donald Trump.
President Trump. Room for one more on Mount Rushmore. The president wants to know. I think the answer is no. What do you guys think?
No.
Let me turn to my next topic. On a more serious note, it appears that President Trump is mirroring the actions of dictators worldwide. Ambassador Eisen, the giant posters of President Trump draped over federal buildings here in Washington evoke the same looming display of Erdogan in Ankara, Turkey, wouldn't you say?
I would, Congressman.
And as the Washington Post has reported, years before Trump gutted the White House to create his golden ballroom, Erdogan built his own vanity project called the White Palace. I'm sure it has a nice ballroom as well. But the similarities don't end with these vanity projects. Under Erdogan, Turkey descended into electoral autocracy through voter roll purges and the intimidation of election officials, right? Mr. Eisen?
Yes, that's correct, Congressman.
And here at home, the president has demanded voter list audits, pushed for voter purges, and just last week, Politico reported that Secretary Mullen threatened election officials with prison time, if they did not cooperate with the administration. You don't dispute that either, right?
I don't, and I'm very proud that our organization quashed a criminal subpoena for one of our clients, a county, Fulton County. It's an abuse of government power.
Totally. Mr. Gollinger, I want to turn to my next topic. I'm sure you are aware of at least 7 individuals who've been charged in connection with vandalism of President Trump's vanity projects, correct?
I've heard what I've read in the news.
It's fair to say that many, if not all, of these defendants have been victims of overzealous prosecution, right?
And that's certainly what it looks like from the news reports.
Well, let's look at who has not been subject to investigation or prosecution. Leslie Groff. Leslie Groff worked for Jeffrey Epstein for 18 years, scheduling countless massages during which Epstein sexually assaulted underage women. It seems surprising that the Trump's DOJ has not announced an investigation of Groff, correct?
That's troubling.
Leon Black. Leon Black has faced multiple allegations of sexual assault and helped bankroll Epstein to the tune of $158 million. And yet, the DOJ has not announced a single investigation of this man either, correct?
That's troubling.
This contrast says everything about Trump. If you damage one of his vanity projects, such as the reflecting pool, the DOJ will pursue you. However, when extensive records implicate you in the worst sex trafficking ring in modern history, this DOJ will look away. Mr. Gollinger, last month, the New York Times reported that President Trump's construction spree could cost at least $1.2 billion. You don't dispute those numbers, right?
That sounds right. It's probably an undercount in the end.
Probably an undercount. Let's see how this money could be used otherwise. In my home state of Illinois, countless families will lose SNAP benefits under President Trump. $1.2 billion could restore all those SNAP benefits this year. You don't dispute that, right?
No.
Medicaid. Countless Illinoisans are going to lose their Medicaid under Trump. $1.2 billion would restore Medicaid for 130,000 Illinoisans this year.
Yep.
You don't dispute that either.
I don't.
Ultimately, this is a story of priorities, right, Congresswoman Beatty?
You're absolutely right.
President Trump found billions of dollars for his vanity projects, but he cuts billions of dollars from the vital safety net programs that struggling families every day rely on, including, as this woman has pointed out on her excellent sign, 67% of American workers who are living paycheck to paycheck. And that is what today is about. It's one man's vanity over the priorities of the American people. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative. Next up is Representative Brown.
I want to say thanks to Ranking Members Garcia and Blumenthal for holding this shadow hearing today, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I represent Ohio's 11th Congressional District, where families are forced to do even more with even less under this administration. They are worried about whether their rent will increase again, whether child care will consume an entire paycheck, whether they will lose their health care, and whether there will be enough to make ends meet and put food on the table. 2 years ago, Trump promised to lower costs on day one. but his attention has been on just about anything else, anything that glorifies him or enriches himself and his wealthy friends. This president had a choice, and he chose wrong. He chose warfare instead of health care. He chose to cut taxes for billionaires instead of cutting costs for working families. He chose donor giveaways instead of helping families put food on the table. He chose to build shrines unto himself, billion-dollar ballrooms, gilded renovations to the Oval Office, $100 million arch, putting his name on the famed Kennedy Center, $16 million no-bid contracts to donors for botched reflecting pool renovations. That tells the American people everything they need to know about how out of touch he is with reality. When President Trump wants a ballroom, an arch, or any other monument unto himself, there is urgency. There are wealthy donors, there are no-bid contracts, and there are efforts to move hundreds of millions of dollars that Congress appropriated for other purposes. He isn't operating the White House as the people's house. He's operating it like an extension of Mar-a-Lago, a private club where money, access, and loyalty buys influence. It's the new Gilded Age, with Donald Trump acting as the party boss, rewarding friends, enriching insiders, and using public institutions to consolidate his personal power. But when a family needs housing assistance, childcare assistance, food assistance, a stronger child tax credit, or help paying for college, suddenly Republicans' hands are tied, and there's not enough money, they say. Meanwhile, they're cutting every basic social safety net where we have to pay so that we have to pay for tax cuts for wealthy people. The White House is not a private club. The National Mall is not the president's personal property, and taxpayer dollars are not a slush fund for the president's vanity or private enrichment. The true measure of a leader is not the size of a ballroom, the amount of gold on the walls, or whether a public building bears your name. It's whether a child has enough to eat, whether a family has a safe and affordable place to live, whether a parent can afford childcare, and whether someone has a fair chance to pursue an education. President Trump is building monuments for himself while millions of Americans are simply asking their government to provide some help and stability. Congresswoman Beatty, it is always good to serve alongside a fellow Ohioan, and you bring firsthand experience as a trustee. From that perspective, what has President Trump's takeover and politicization of the Kennedy Center done to its governance, public mission, and standing as an institution that belongs to all Americans, not any one president or political faction?
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you, and thank you for your service in asking me that question. I think as you've heard from all of the witnesses here, what he has done is led what many of us already were aware of, that he has no interest in the American people. He has no interest in the services that you just outlined for us. Because when you think about how he is putting millions, if not billions of dollars into these vanity projects, and as you talked about our children, when you think of in your great state, some 50,000 children have lost their SNAP benefits. Overall, 1.5 million children. When we talk about retrofitting housing for those who are in need of one of our top priorities, he's cut those funds, and the list could go on and on. Part of the reason that we are here today is to make sure that the American people who are watching us know that they don't have to stand for this. Their voices are powerful. We have heard from experts here in all avenues of the historic landmarks that he's ruining. And so I think the number one answer for me is enough is enough. And we can be victorious by continuing to speak up. But we need the American people to stand with us. That's probably the greatest message that we can have. We've been victorious in the courtroom. We're going to be victorious with the people. And so we need to make sure that people go out and use their voices, that they vote their voice, and they're voting for the things that will help them have a better quality of life.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And if the chairman will indulge me, you spoke on experts. Mr. Gollinger, when wealthy donors with businesses before the federal government finance the president's preferred projects, politically connected companies receive no bid contracts and public funds are redirected, it begins to resemble a modern political patronage machine. What safeguards are being passed and what information must Congress obtain to determine whether access, contracts, or favorable government treatment are being exchanged for political or financial support?
I mean, the point of having a free and fair marketplace is that the best product, the best service wins for the best price. That's the opposite of what you just described. Giving wealthy donors, politically connected folks, people who are engaging in backroom deals for the ballroom and these other projects, a leg up on competition that's trying it the real, honest way, distorts the system, costs the American people more, and destroys trust in government. So every single donor to all these projects should be sitting here answering questions about how much they gave, who they talked to, and what they got for it. They should be doing it today under the current majority in the Senate and the House, but I hope they will be doing it next year because it's a red flag when you donate to a politician who then gives you something back. It should be the opposite.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Senator Hirono, who has joined us. And just as I know a lot of us have been going a little bit over, which I think everyone has been guilty of, so I'm going to try to keep us a little closer to those 5 minutes if possible. But Senator, thank you.
Thank you. To focus on the corruption of this regime, I call it regime because of its authoritarianism. And at this point, there are over 800 lawsuits that have been filed to stop Trump from doing all of his illegal actions, whether it's holding back appropriations that Congress has already provided, and the list goes on. I did want to ask, I think that we have two lawyers on the panel, Mr. Gollinger and Ambassador, is it Eisen? Okay. I want to ask you, do you think the president believes that the rule of law applies to him?
Do I think that Donald Trump believes the rule of law applies to him? Is that the question?
Yeah. Do you think that he thinks the rule of law applies to him?
No. This individual thinks he is above the law.
Okay. What happened to Mr. Eisen?
I think he just stepped out into the back.
Okay.
But he's
I
coming.
can't quite make you all out. Okay, so meanwhile, the Supreme Court decided in I would call it the infamous 2024 immunity decision, where basically they gave the president immunity from criminal prosecution. Do you think that this decision simply caused Trump to truly believe that the law was on his side when he decided to do all kinds of things that are probably highly questionable from an ethical as well as a legal standpoint?
Well, I wouldn't, neither as a lawyer nor as an American, try to get inside Donald Trump's head, because that's a losing battle and I don't want to be there. But I would say that it's certainly, in my experience, exactly how crooks operate, is that when they're given an open door and no oversight, they raid the bank. And that's what this president's been doing every day.
Well, do you, I want to thank all of the panelists for testifying today, but do you think, for any of you, do you think we have a democracy without checks and balances and rule of law?
Absolutely not under this president and this administration. They have no respect for the rule of law. And certainly when you talk about our democracy, I think that's why we're here. We're fighting to restore our democracy and to have fairness for all American people.
So in your view, we do not have an appropriate checks and balances at this point?
Definitely not. This president acts as a dictator.
And the rest of the panel, do you think that we have checks and balances as far as this regime is concerned? You have to speak into the mic.
I would like to have hope that we still can.
Sure. I mean, I think I'd say the same. My title is democracy advocate, so that's what I fight for every day. But I've never seen it more in danger, certainly in my life. And I don't think in the 250 years of the existence of this country that a real American democracy with checks and balances, which ensure that we don't have a king again, which is what the Declaration of Independence had 27 grievances against. And unless we get that back, we fear it could slip back into what we fought against.
So what do you think we need to do in order to restore checks and balances and the rule of law in this country?
I think we need to put a spotlight on every single problem that's been outlined today. I think the American people, I trust the American people. I don't think most hardworking Americans want a government that steals from them, that enriches themselves, and that gives us bad outcomes. I don't think that's what the people of this country want, but I think they have to see it. So there's a lot more that people are seeing now than they were a year and a half ago, but I do think it's the job of everyone in this room, everyone watching, and everyone who has a platform and a chance to investigate to put the spotlight on the corruption. I think the American people, when they see it, they'll vote. They'll do everything they can to stop it.
Oh, I agree with you. I think that's why the spotlight hearing is so important. And when we have the executive branch, the House, U.S. Senate, controlled by one person, the president, we do not have checks and balances, and the only entity that is preventing the total annihilation, I would say, of a democracy are the courts, and we have a president who believes that judges ought to be impeached, judges who hold against him, which they do, thankfully, in about 75% of the cases that are filed, that he thinks that those judges ought to be impeached. What do you think?
I mean, I think that's a horrible way to show respect for the rule of law.
Do the rest of the panelists agree?
Agree.
Is my time up, Mr. Chairman?
Almost, but if you have another question, please close.
Thank you very much. And once again, I think it is very important to shine a spotlight literally on all of the illegalities, I would say, of this regime, and the fact that he believes he can do whatever he wants. I mean, whoever heard of any president who would destroy half of the White House, who will build a fight ring behind the White House, who would do all these contracts, non-bid contracts to his pals, who sells everything he can sell, including now coins. It's just amazing to me. And thank you all for shining a light on all of his illegalities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Now we have Representative Stansbury.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to just start out by saying, Congresswoman, Madam Joyce Beatty, you are an American hero. And I am certain that this era in American history will go down as an era. I don't know what we're going to call it yet, but I know the history books are going to remember the heroes who stood up. And I know that Congresswoman Beatty, I know that our advocates, I know that the attorneys who are on the front lines litigating these cases will be in the history books. And I also know that this administration and this president, which is filled with grifters, scammers, scoundrels, and yes, sketchy schemes, as you said, sir, who are selling access, favors, pardons, and just making money every single day for their friends, are not only going to go down in history for the malfeasance that they have committed against this government and our people, but I am also certain that this Congress is going to investigate every single inch and hold them accountable. And that is what this hearing is about today. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about how these sketchy schemes are really centering around our monuments and our most treasured places. Let's begin with the White House. The White House has never simply been the president's house or a residence. It is the people's house, a symbol of our democracy, a symbol of our commitment to transitions, peaceful transitions of power, and it belongs to the American people. And not only has this president broken the law by demolishing the East Wing and destroying irreparably history that has existed on that property since this nation's founding, they have given it away to the highest bidder, 27 corporate donors, 15 individual donors who have given millions of dollars in exchange for over $50 billion in contracts by the federal government. Amazon, Apple, Coinbase, Google, HP, Lockheed, Palantir. These are the people who bought the demolition of the White House. Arlington National Cemetery. Arlington is one of our most sacred places as a nation. More than 400,000 service members and their families are laid to rest here. Every monument, pathway, and memorial exists to honor the sacrifice of the men and women who have given their lives for this great country. And now Donald Trump wants to spend $100 million of your taxpayer dollars. He's not even asking for his illicit donations to put an arch up to himself that would block the view of one of our most sacred memorials of unknown soldiers. The Kennedy Center opened in 1971 as a living memorial to President John F. Kennedy. It is a symbol of bipartisan culture and arts that has hosted artists, programming for decades, for generations, representing the best of this country. Not only did he try to inscribe his name on this building, he has set up a pay-to-play scheme that has involved self-dealing and replaced some of the most important programming that this country puts on every day, and this amazing center remains closed right now. Our Smithsonian and our National Mall. Today, we had a hearing in the Oversight Committee in which our Republican colleagues were ordered by the White House to hold a hearing under the pretext that they are going to take out the leadership of the Smithsonian because they don't like the way they're telling our history. Donald Trump has given no big contracts to his friends to tear up the National Mall. And he has, as the chairman, ranking member of Natural Resources has revealed, used Freedom 250 as a front for fraud and money laundering and actually diverting private donations from corporations like Oracle, Lockheed, and yes, Palantir once again to his own nonprofit. Our public lands. I'm from New Mexico. Our most sacred public lands include places like Chaco Canyon and Bears Ears in Utah, places that are completely irreplaceable, sacred to the tribes all across our state and all across the West. And this president has just announced that he is going to revoke the protections as giveaways to the oil and gas industry and to uranium miners in Utah. This is not just about defacing our American monuments. This is not just about his ego. Donald Trump is using the American taxpayer dollars as a personal piggy bank. He is defacing our most sacred places, and he is doing it for just everyday grift to make himself and his friends rich. In fact, we know, because of his own financial disclosures, that he made over $2 billion last year in crypto schemes, real estate deals, and I just learned today by more insider trading on the stock market than all of the members of Congress combined last year. We think we have insider trading problems here in Congress. Donald Trump made more trades than all of Congress last year while a sitting president. And so we want to make clear, loud and clear on these bicameral committees that we will investigate. Where possible, we will refer to prosecute. We will recover damages. We will get the American people's money back, and we will save our democracy just as the heroes on this panel today are here to do.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I will now recognize myself. The Trump regime is the most corrupt in American history. The corrupt authoritarian wannabe king, Donald Trump, is selling off America's national monuments, also that he can turn the White House into his own version of Versailles, and so that he can turn Washington, D.C. into his own personal playground. And I want to talk about the context in which he is doing all of this. Last year, Trump and Republicans very happily and excitedly ripped away health care from millions and millions of Americans. It was the most unprecedented cut to Medicaid and food assistance in American history. Then Donald Trump decided to cover up the Epstein files. And now we have Todd Blanche in front of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, and he is about to maybe become the Attorney General of the United States, as he has led the most egregious cover-up in American history. And then Donald Trump also decided to start an illegal, reckless war. This last week, a 19-year-old woman named Isabella Gonzalez was killed, an American service member, was killed in a war for nothing, for absolutely nothing. ICE has murdered 11 Americans on our streets, and just in the last week, we lost a 52-year-old and a father named Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, as well as a 26-year-old father named Joan Sebastian Guerrero. These are murders that should never have happened. And I bring all of this up because when you contrast all of the horrific things that Donald Trump and Republicans are doing, quite literally killing thousands upon thousands of people, with the corruption, the staggering corruption that is occurring at the White House, and corruption that is benefiting Trump himself, his family, his donors, it's enraging. I mean, it's actually sick. And we, as Democrats, and hopefully in the future with Republicans, need to investigate every single piece of corruption that has taken place, and we have to prosecute people for their crimes. Ranking Members Garcia, Huffman, and I wrote to the president back in October regarding his obscene demolition of the East Wing. We stated that this demolition of an iconic symbol of democracy run by and for the people is slated to be funded by major donations from billionaires and corporations. There was this lavish White House dinner, of course. We've talked about it. Donors enjoying this extravagant meal of beef Wellington and butterscotch ice cream with pear jam-filled meringue to discuss how to bankroll Donald Trump's luxury ballroom and other vanity projects. Some of the people at that dinner were powerful lobbyists, dozens of whom are now under investigation for their ethical misconduct in supporting these luxury Trump projects. We demanded a list of every donor, how much they've contributed, and any access, favors, contracts, or decisions that they expected from the federal government in return. It took nearly 5 months to get a response from this administration. And when they finally did respond, they answered essentially none of our questions about one of the most brazen corruption schemes being run by the White House. Maybe they did not want to admit that ballroom donors later received roughly $50 billion worth of federal government contracts. That's quite a return on investment. These mega corporations made back nearly 100 times every cent that they funneled to Donald Trump's $600 million ballroom. If that's not pay-to-play corruption, then what is? And then there's this guy. You saw him earlier. He's back up here. John Carafo, a twice convicted felon. He somehow received a $1.74 million no-bid contract to maintain the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. How did somebody with those qualifications land a no-bid federal contract? Well, he donated more than $300,000 to Donald Trump's political operation. It's that simple. This is exactly what corruption looks like. This is not government serving the American people. It is government serving Donald Trump's donors, Donald Trump's family, and Donald Trump. And it's sickening. Mr. Gallinger, I'd like to start with you. Can you give us your best sense of the scale and scope of the compromised ethical standards and theft of taxpayer dollars we are seeing throughout the federal government?
The scale and scope, I mean, it's massive. This is, this looks like, smells like, and I think is a pay-to-play scheme from top to bottom. So everyone associated with everything you just mentioned has a lot to answer for to the American people, to Congress, I hope, and potentially to prosecutors. If There is evidence that conversations were had, whether even if they were on Signal chats that they think disappeared forever, but maybe didn't, or on some other method around why they were going to these dinners, why they were giving this money, what they wanted, who they wanted to meet. I mean, I've heard that some of the fundraisers involved have done a lot more than just raise money, that they've arranged meetings, they've merged interests and money into one thing. I mean, that's the very definition of pay to play. So we need the evidence to make sure we can tease it out, but that's what investigations are for. And I found in my experience investigating public corruption that it takes a long time and you got to get the documents. But once people realize that they're caught, some people start to talk. And so I think it's incumbent upon everyone involved in anything shady to start talking now and get ahead of it rather than wait until they're the ones in the chair.
And in a future administration, how might that investigation play out? What could the Department of Justice or the White House do?
Sure. I mean, certainly Congress has got to play a big role. Inspectors General have to play a big role. I mean, the Department of Justice, obviously the public corruption unit needs to be rebuilt. But U.S. attorneys' offices in every state, there's a lot of good people, I imagine, who still work in all of those places, and a lot of great people who would be happy to get hired back up. What it has to begin with is witness interviews, knocking on doors, inviting people in, asking people to talk about what they know, document requests, and if they don't get the documents voluntarily, search warrants, subpoenas. That can include communication records, financial records. I mean, money has to go through unless it's a bag of cash. I mean, even if it's a bag of cash, someone can take a picture of a bag of cash. But if it's money that's gone through financial transactions, there is a record, even if that record people think will never be found. I found bank accounts that the people who I prosecuted thought no one would ever figure out were routed through banks in Chicago when they lived in San Francisco, but we found it. So the records exist, they just need to be found.
Thank you very much. And I know we're over time. Really quickly, to all of our witnesses, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the level of corruption Donald Trump has authorized, encouraged, and participated in the federal government? And I will say that 10 would be Putin-level kleptocracy, and 1 would be the most ethical administration you can imagine. We'll start with Ambassador.
11.
I'll say 11.
I haven't dealt with corruption before, so I'm going to abstain from answering this.
Can't imagine much more.
No number high enough, off the charts with it.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to recognize Representative Bell.
I'd like to start just by putting ourselves in the shoes of a working family in St. Louis right now. Since President Trump took office, families are paying $310 more a year for groceries, $622 more for housing, and $110 more for electricity. The price of gas has jumped by over $1 nationally, a direct consequence of an unpopular, unauthorized war in Iran that has no clear end goal. And economists project this administration's tariffs will cost the average household another $960 this year. That's not just a statistic. That's a young mother in North County deciding between the energy bill and new shoes for her kids. That's a retired postal worker in St. Louis, in South St. Louis, watching their fixed income buy less every single month. A North City father already working 2 jobs, deciding if he can fill up his gas tank or if he needs to skip a meal. And while families do that math at their kitchen tables, President Trump has spent nearly 4 out of every 5 days in June talking about his vanity construction projects in Washington, D.C. That's more often than he's talked about health care, wages, or the cost of living crisis he created. That tells you everything about this administration's priorities. And it's not just where his attention goes, it's where the money goes and how it gets there. This administration has made a habit of funneling these projects through friends, donors, and insiders instead of the open, competitive process that's supposed to protect taxpayers. That's a system built to reward loyalty over accountability. The result is exactly what you'd expect. Rushed, sloppy work that has to be redone, monuments in public spaces treated like personal property, and a bill that keeps growing while my constituents in St. Louis are told to tighten their belts. Mr. Gollinger, you've looked closely at how this administration has financed and awarded contracts for these projects. In plain terms, can you walk us through the pattern you found, who benefits, and why bypassing the normal competitive contracting process, why this should worry taxpayers?
I think that's a good question. We talked, no bid contracts have been discussed a lot today. Certainly intuitively, I think many people, maybe most, understand that that means done in a way that's going to cost us more money and going to potentially engender corruption. But I think it's important to walk through it a little bit more. So I think this was mentioned earlier, the Washington Post unearthed documents from the executive residence of the White House, which is traditionally a small office in the White House that keeps the White House running, right? These are the people who make sure the art is protected, make sure the building is kept up to speed, the windows are repaired, and the president has what he needs, what he or she needs to do their job. The executive residence of the White House and the offices associated with it have been turned into the Donald Trump vanity project corruption machine. And specifically, the ballroom is that is the office under Joshua Fisher, who's the director of administration, assistant to the president. All the money for the ballroom has been given to a charity, to the Park Service, and then back to that office. But the Washington Post reported that documents all the way back in August, long before anyone of us knew their plan was to demolish the East Wing, with Clark Construction, no bid contracts were awarded by Donald Trump and the folks in that office to Clark Construction without going out to bid. So that means that no other developer, no other construction company got a chance to offer the same services for less price. Obviously, it means the American people didn't know what they were planning to do, so they did it in secrecy. They invoked an unusual and compelling urgency exception. So there's rules, I know you all know, but there's rules, federal rules to require competitive bids unless there's an exception. The exception they invoked is that it's unusual, compelling urgency, that without no bid contract, the government would be seriously injured, that there was a compelling need. What was it that Donald Trump wanted it, apparently? So that's a legislative space where Congress, the next Congress, can close that loophole and make sure the executive residence can't give out no bid contracts. And if they do invoke exceptions like that, they have to sit here and explain why.
Thank you. And Ambassador Eisen, you spent your career studying government ethics. When the American people can't tell the difference between the president's personal interests and the government's priorities, what does that do to their trust in the institution?
It demolishes trust in our institutions and the officials who lead them. When I was the ethics czar in the Obama White House, we decided that President Obama wouldn't even refinance his modest family home in Chicago at the time of the Great Recession because he regulated the banks. We didn't like the way it looked. It would have saved him a couple $100 a month. The flip side of that erosion of trust, Congressman, is when you see that political leaders are putting the public interest first, it builds trust and makes our American democratic experiment work.
Working families in St. Louis play by the rules and live within their means. It's time the administration did the same. And Congresswoman Beatty, thank you for your work. I yield back.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Congressman Menifee.
Thank you very much. And Congressman Beatty, I just want to echo everybody's sentiments about the fight that you endured on behalf of the Kennedy Center and on behalf of the American people. I want to be the first person to say that President Trump's attempts to remake all of these institutions in his likeness is incredibly tacky. Congresswoman Beatty, one thing that struck me was in your lawsuit, when the government argued that changing the name was necessary to revitalize the center, which would go into financial and structural collapse unless they attached a Trump name to it. I wonder if the government was aware of Trump stakes in Trump University. In my hometown of Houston, like in many other places across this country, families are struggling to make ends meet. They can't afford their first home. They can't afford the cost of utilities. Many can't afford summer camp for their kids. So it's hard to watch this president spend $1 billion on ballrooms, on gold trim, and on fonts for a Trump center. while telling the rest of us that there's no money left. There are no kings in America, and the American people didn't sign up to personally fund one man's vanity projects. I want to start with you, Mr. Gollinger. In April, the administration handed out 2 no-bid contracts. No competition, no public bidding process to clean and repaint the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool. One contract worth $1.7 million went to a company owned by this gentleman that we've talked about, Mr. Cafaro, who has pled guilty in 2010 to campaign finance violations and had previously pled guilty to conspiring to bribe a federal official. And we all know that he's given big money to President Trump's campaign. Weeks after that cleanup was finished, the pool turned green with one of the biggest algae blooms in years, and the fresh blue paint started peeling and floating on the surface. Now, I've got 5 years in local government, serving as the county attorney for the largest county in Texas as the chief civil lawyer, 10 years before that in doing investigations for large companies. I have never, in all of my time, seen a no-bid contract handed to somebody with a bribery conviction. So my question to you is, in your work tracking government contracts, and I know you have some experience in local government as well, how often does the government hand a no-bid confidential contract to someone with a bribery conviction?
It's a very bad idea. I mean, I certainly would say I mean, in San Francisco where I worked, I mean, that was a deal breaker, obviously, immediately. The line is, the only line would be if someone is accused, people have the right to defend themselves, but that doesn't appear to be the case here. And the problem, of course, is that at minimum, the public faith that this contract was done properly and effectively, and that most of the money is going to actually do the job instead of back into someone's pocket, is completely eroded. And so that should be absolutely never. That should be something that absolutely never happens again.
All of the incentives are eroded, and if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Ambassador Eisen, we are kindred spirits. You've talked a lot about all of your litigation experience against the Trump administration. In my last job, I spent a bunch of time litigating and beating the Trump administration because their lawyers are not good. But I want to talk to you about the rule of law in institutions in this country and the role that they play in holding this administration accountable. We have seen action after action taken against the Trump administration because they have stepped outside of the bounds of the Constitution and the law. From layoffs of federal employees to what we've seen at the Kennedy Center, the reversal of the plain text of the Constitution and birthright citizenship, cuts of grant funds, which impacted local governments and nonprofits across this country, and of course the firing of Fed Governor Lisa Cook. This is just a few of the list of things. How important are the courts in ensuring that we keep a rogue president within the confines of the Constitution and the laws of this nation?
We were very honored at Democracy Defenders to help put together the team, to serve as part of the team that defended Dr. Cook up to and including the Supreme Court. Winning at the Supreme Court, it was a bipartisan team protecting her and the Federal Reserve, the independence of our nation's monetary policy, and the prosperity of every American. The courts were essential in that case, Congressman, as they have been in our over 300 matters, the well over 600 cases that courts have addressed. And in particular, I want to salute the trial courts of the country. We just had a tremendous win in front of it. A judge who was appointed by Donald Trump, but he quashed a subpoena. You know how hard it is to do that. He quashed a Trump administration subpoena, unduly interfering with election processes in Fulton County, Georgia. And so our trial judges have been absolutely essential, and we've been keeping them busy. One said to me from the bench, "We can't do our job unless you do yours." So we're going to keep these cases coming, and in particular, we're going to protect this election. It all comes down to that, the future of our democracy. We're going to defend it.
In closing, Madam Chairwoman, there are 3 co-equal branches of government, and when the president steps out of line, you need the other 2 to step in. So I'm so grateful for the folks who have been involved in ensuring that the courts step in, but it's time for Congress to do its job, and for the Republican members of Congress to exercise their authority to investigate and hold this administration accountable. I yield back, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. And finally, I will recognize Congresswoman Tlaib.
Thank you all so much for being here. And I know, Congresswoman Beatty, that you might not feel comfortable constantly us thanking you, but thank you so much for your courage. I know you were tenacious and determined, and we are very grateful for you. And of course, all the folks at Kennedy and those that helped, again, organize and push back against the administration. So I want to play a little game, since he likes games too. I want to talk about what did Trump say it would cost game, okay? Yeah, Ambassador, this is going to be fun. Because you know why? Because they constantly come to me when we talk about healthcare, food assistance, all these programs, waste and fraud, waste and fraud, waste and fraud. I want to talk about what did Trump say it would cost. Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool, does anybody know how much he said it was going to cost us? 1.5 to 1.8 million. You know, Congresswoman, how much it's going to cost? It's already at $16 million. I want the American people to understand, okay? Second, Ballroom said, oh, it's going to cost us $200 million. It's our money, y'all. $200 million. He says private, folks, but guess what? It's not. He's pocketing that money. The Ballroom, $200 million. Guess how much it is now? It's exceeding $1 billion. The 200-foot tall arc, I don't know what the hell he calls it, but it's an arc. How much the initial cost? They're saying $100 million. Experts say it's going to cost a lot more. These are architects. These are folks that do this kind of work. And on top of that, there's all these lawsuits because the arc is I guess, exceeds the height limitation. This is ridiculous. Talk about waste. Now talk about golf courses. You know anything about that, Ambassador? The hell is going on with the golf course? I think the American people need to know. He wants to take 50 acres of public land, a bike trail, historic grove of cherry trees, to put a freaking golf course. Talk about waste. Do you know about the golf course?
A little bit, yes.
Who benefits from the golf course?
Well, right now, as you know, Congresswoman, families, children play with their parents, the grandparents. He's going to turn it into a Trump Country Club style golf course that average folks can't afford to play.
It's incredibly sickening. I mean, I think, you know, and I know my colleagues know this, we go to our communities. I mean, to quote a Detroiter, I'm from Detroit, you know, my seniors just tell it like it is. What the hell is he doing with our money? Why aren't you guys stopping them? No, I'm being serious. And I tell them this is pretty unprecedented, the incredible amount of fraud that Republican leadership and those around him continue to allow him to commit. You know, when I talk to folks about, you know, everybody talks about him filing bankruptcy with his hotels and casinos. But no, really, how many times do you think he filed bankruptcy? Once? Twice? 6 times. 6 times he filed bankruptcy. And he's in charge of our public money. I mean, we're going to push back. We're going to use litigation as resistance. We all know that. But at the end, I think it's really important how painful it is to watch the American people. American people, it's very painful for them to watch 15% cut to SNAP benefits, telling them they don't have money for clean water. Yet you see all these projects, again, over and over again, my colleagues come to us and say, it's going to cost this or cost that. I really appreciate everyone being here. I appreciate this hearing. I think at the end, though, and if anybody has advice, I mean, at the end, I think it's what do we do on day one when we get the gavel back? And we need to be very aggressive about it from day one. What do we do? Because I don't want to just get the gavel back. That power means something for our people. They're giving us a chance to, you know, be able to get accountability and justice. So day one, what do we do? Ambassador?
I would focus on the biggest grifts and go deep. Get every witness. Let people know you're focusing on at the Contrarian, where I'm the publisher, we have a top 10 corruption list that we update every couple months. The temptation, Congresswoman, is to go very broad because there's so many hundreds, thousands
I also want to
of
prevent it.
examples.
Like, I want to think of ways of how we can prevent it.
But I think if we can focus on those, and then learn the prevention lessons from
I didn't know, you know,
those.
emoluments clause is in there, and but there's no enforcement mechanism to the emoluments clause. John, Mr. Gallagher.
Well, I was going to say, there's no better enforcement mechanism than a perp walk. If corporate executives
I like that.
who
I
are
like you. That's very good.
are discovered
Yeah.
engaging in pay-to-play corruption are walked in front of the cameras, first of all, to a hearing room, and then if they committed a crime, to the courtroom, that's the best deterrent of all.
Yeah. Mr. Chauncey, am I saying that right?
I may mention the parks in my comments here. I'm just an ordinary person, and thank you all for having me here. But funding to the Park Service is incredibly important. Rehiring all those vacant positions and the folks that were fired in the past year, and improving veteran and military access to nature and outdoor recreation opportunities. That's what I would do on day one.
Yeah, restoration. I like that. Mr. Folds?
Well, since I'm here as my experience in the Kennedy Center, I would say we need a firewall from now on that is indestructible between the President of the United States and our arts.
Yeah.
And that needs to have
Congresswoman
oversight.
Beatty's got that. How about you, Congresswoman?
I would say all of the above, but I would overturn all of the executive orders that hurt the people. I would make sure that when we talk about restoring, whether it's the dollars to SNAP you meant, child care, housing, and the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. I yield.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Appreciate all of our colleagues from the House being here today. I want to express my appreciation, especially to Congressman Garcia for his leadership, and to all of our witnesses. This panel has been amazing. To everybody watching here or remotely, thank you for caring about our democracy. And I just come back to where I began. Corruption has costs. Corruption has costs in money that's taken from taxpayers, spent on these projects wastefully, and there needs to be accountability. The construction has destroyed iconic symbols of America, the reflecting pool being only one of them. And the contracts are the symbol of this corruption. No bid, single source contracts with pals of the president, donors to his campaign, pay to play. And of course, we need to somehow repair the damage, if we can. We can't reconstruct the East Wing. It's gone. But we can at least insist on accountability. And we can also work for reforms of the system that prevent it, hopefully in the future. And in the meantime, the perp walk is an option, but name and shame, even without charges necessarily, civil action to recover money and impose penalties when there is favoritism or ethical violation. There's no ethics czar in the White House on the side of ethics right now. The czar is unethical. So I want to thank everyone involved in this hearing. We're going to pursue these issues, hopefully with subpoena power and other compulsory process at some point. But one way or the other, the American people deserve the facts, documents, evidence, testimony, and we're beginning now. Thank you all. This hearing is adjourned.